Welcome, everybody, and I'd say good morning, good evening, good afternoon, or good night, wherever and whenever you're listening to this. Welcome to today's town hall. We are writing the town hall number 23. We have a couple of hot topics that we want to talk today about, and let me quickly or briefly go over them to give you some sort of an overview what you can expect today. So first things first, we do have a couple of changes upcoming in the next release for the ESP minor release. And then we also do have a couple of bugs that have been found, and one of them has been found by Ben, if I'm not mistaken, and fixed by a couple more. So I'd say let's start with this one Ben, right? So can you quickly share with us what you found?
Yeah, so we had a bunch of reports coming in, you know, after we've had a few thousand units out there of both units having overheating issues with stock settings, reading low, reading high, having a lot of variance in the temperature readings. So I dug into it and immediately I could tell that something was off. Um, taking measurements, they didn't line up with what I was seeing on thermal probes and a couple other methods. So I dug into it and I found that the EMC 2101 IC has a lot of configuration that can be set, and it didn't quite to be set appropriate for what we were doing. So I spent probably at least 1 or 2 days trying to find settings that would accurately reflect what the die temperature was. But in the end, actually, we were also, in addition to the misconfiguring the temperature sensor, we were not configuring the ASIC properly. We had just copied over code from the Supra for this new chip,
Hmm.
and we missed the register. So after we got that new register set correctly, I was able to find a combination of settings that um, now accurately reflect the die temperature of the gamma, and I would pretty confident in saying it's accurate within our 1 or 2 degrees of the actual temperature. So that's across all the units I've tested. So
So this sounds so
all in
far
all, it
so
was
good. What was like the
yeah,
difference between the reader temperature and the temperature that we have been reading before that?
it varied depending on the unit. The sometimes they would overheat, or they would say they overheat almost immediately, or sometimes they would come in uh, under the actual temperature, which is also not a good thing. So it was kind of all over the place.
Mm-hmm. I mean that's by far really a great change because we had plenty of people, as you pointed out, this that were referring to some sort of an overheat issue, and it's quite funny that we never really thought about that we're missing a register or that there might be something off. And if I'm not mistaken, I've also read that you wrote there is some sort of a calibration needed for the IC for the MC 2101.
Initially, my first attempt, I thought there might have needed a calibration, but it turns out after the ASIC register was set appropriately, that's not needed anymore.
Oh, that's great.
It's able to kind of auto calibrate itself. It does a bunch of kind of magic stuff in the background that's not really uh, transparent to us, but it seems to work now. So
It's great. I mean, yeah, it is definitely a needed change, and as some of you that have tuned in earlier maybe noticed that there is some sort of, I'd say a little bit of not an argument, but like we're going back and forth how we should push this for next release, maybe with a couple major releases together, or maybe not. So we do have a couple of people that have different opinions on that. Um, So we do already have a pre-release of the version 2.3.1, which is currently set to be beta 1 with a couple other changes. But it might be that these changes are too major for just a .1 release, so we might need to opt for the 2.4 version. But yeah, it is quite a tough challenge, and in the end, I'll try to make sure to go all these changes that are coming very soon to you guys. Um, if you haven't done so, in our Discord channel, we do have a channel which is called Apply for Role, where you can apply for becoming a firmware tester, and then you do get access to the firmware testing channel. It is limited to 30 people. We do have a couple. There are still a couple of spots left. Just apply there, and then you can help us improve it better, because of course we're great in doing fixes and everything, but we can't always test all the devices for a number of reasons. But this is one way of how you can participate and help us out, which is highly appreciated. And for those of you who are listening to this later on, if you don't know what Discord is, or have never used it, or you're not on our server, check out discord.gg/osmu, and you'll directly go over to our server. All right. Yeah, I do see in the chat here a couple of people. A great gift from Crypto Ice. Accept the heat, be the heat. Yeah, it's quite challenging, I'd say, to actually get the chip cooled down. There's also like this sort of arguing and going back and forth about the heatsink that we do have. Some people argue it is way too small. Some others say it is right on spot. Do you have any opinions on that?
Yeah, I think it's perfectly adequate for the default settings. Obviously, these chips can be pushed pretty high, so if you want to go above and beyond, you're going to need, some better cooling. But, I don't necessarily think you need these giant heat pipe towers either for good temperatures. I think they're a little bit overkill. But that said, so we have some, I think, kind of alternative heat sinks coming. I know Dunk's working on one. I'm working on one that are going to be in a similar form factor as the kind of like the default cooler here, but they should have significantly higher performance. So we'll be able to kind of keep the same footprint and hopefully kind of improve in the future.
Oh yeah,
this was a heat sink that was chosen in the original project. And it was quite, it was 10 watts instead of 20 plus. So
yeah, it's quite funny. I mean, with the original device of the Bitaxe Max, there was not really that much power that we should dissipate. But now with the Beam 1370, you can crank this thing up. And if I'm not mistaken, Crypto Ice did a little bit of his immersion magic already and cranked it up to like 40 or 45 watts. Which is in a reasonable range, I'd say. There's probably more room upwards. But we'll see. Especially with the heatsink that we do have here. And as you pointed out, it is adequate for the default settings. And if you guys are now wondering what we're talking about, if you do purchase a Bitaxe or if you build yourself, which is hopefully the case, you do notice really quickly there are options for you to increase the frequency or lower the frequency as well as the voltage. So it is good consideration, and I'd say common sense, hopefully, at least in my sense, that if you do try to crank this thing up, make sure that you also change things on your cooling, because there are different variations of it. Some of them do have a 20 millimeter thick fan, others only have a 10 millimeter thick fan, and depending on where you purchased the device or what kind of device you got, it might be the case that these things behave different. I, for example, do have a Gamma here next to me, which is running with a 10 millimeter fan. It is working okay on stock settings, but it's definitely doing better on another device with a 20 millimeter fan, just for example. And we also do have, let me check, is he somewhere here in the audience? No, he's not, but we do have someone in our Discord community who is regularly posting on his blog about all sorts of things. Like, he's trying to figure out what kind of temperatures you can get on the device with different heat sinks, which is quite interesting and really nice to see that people are tinkering around on this as well. Alright, we do see a couple of things here in the chat. For example, Anderson was writing, the PSU is likely to be the first limitation in overclocking. It could be. I mean, we do have the TPS 546 now on newer models with Gamma and newest Ultras as well. I'm not sure, Ben, have you ever produced 207 versions?
207?
Yeah.
No.
Oh. But it is there, if I'm not mistaken. Somewhere out there. Or no,
I don't remember what the
four,
highest 207.
wait. Was it 207 or was it 403 with the TPS 546?
Yeah, I produced the 403, sure.
Ah, all right, there you
That's
go.
with the Supra with the TPS 546.
Yeah, this was like a change from the buck converter and the MOSFETs to an, I'd say, all-in-one device. A IC that does everything in one package instead of having multiple ICs on the back of your board. But it comes with limitations as well. But the operational range for temperature-wise is that, if I'm not mistaken, please correct me, Ben, the TPS 546 can go up to 120 degrees Celsius, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I mean the amp rating on that I think is 25, which would give you like 32 watts at the chip. Um, but that's with passive cooling. You could definitely, I think, add a heat sink to it and push it further. Or I know some people doing the immersion probably go a lot further than that.
Do you know what the max rating of amperage is for this?
I think it depends on how well that chip is cooled. As long as you're not hitting the maximum temperature, I think you're okay. The other thing too, the traces that actually go to the chip are, I would say, probably not adequate for super high overclocking. That's something we're going to expand on in the future. But we're not making these things to really, you know,
To
double the
overheat.
hash rate,
I mean,
right? It's not good. It's not good for the chips either.
sure.
You're gonna get the most longevity out of them if you run the default settings. So proceed
That's
at your own risk.
that's for sure. I mean, sure, a couple of people are interested in overclocking it, and there was also this debate on an issue on GitHub from people asking for the settings page to also show what kind of hash rate is expected with certain frequencies and voltage levels. But we kind of decided not to go with this change for the reason being that we are not really forcing, or we are not really in this position where we think it's a good idea to tell you, hey, you can overclock it. Sure, you can do it, you can tinker around with it, but the way you most likely will get it is with a stock fan and a stock heatsink, nothing modified. And if you're then trying to overclock it because you do think, all right, I can get like 500 gigahertz more out of this, but all of a sudden you overheat constantly, it's not really a great idea.
Yeah. At least from my CPU overclocking experience, if you run chips at too high of a voltage for a long time, um, my understanding is like essentially the eddy currents caused by the electrons moving around can actually erode your transistors and cause permanent damage. So your chip will become unstable or not perform at all, or potentially even break completely.
Hmm.
So that's it's a balance between longevity and performance.
I mean, sure, that's also the reason why we do see a couple of companies using bitmain chips and just putting plenty of them on one single hash board, but underclocking them heavily, just to increase the longevity of them. I'd assume we've seen a couple of companies doing that.
I'd say probably that's more for just efficiency, but
Hmm.
I'm sure even at moderately overclock settings, they'll still last many years. So
We do see the question: is 230 supported for other boards besides the Gamma? If so, will the web flasher be updated to allowing flashing 230 on the Super? So that's actually a good segue to this topic. So generally, all the versions that we do release are there for the Max, the Ultra, the Super, and the Gamma. Firmware releases for the hacks, I'd say, sort of currently halted because I moved it over to a separate repository on the GitHub user or GitHub community Bitaxe.org, and then you can find the repository in ESP-miner-multichip, which is basically just a repo just for the hacks. Maybe we move it back into ESP Miner. Don't know. For now, I don't really have the time to tinker around with it. There are a couple of changes implemented in it, but I haven't come across to release the version ODA 2 because it's unstable and I haven't had time to fix them. But speaking about the web flasher, so the current web flasher that you do probably know, which I created at wantglue.github.io dash slash bitx dash web dash flasher, is sort of in an archived state. It is there, it is working, and I now created a new one, which you can find under bitxorg.github.io slash bitx-web-flasher. I know these links are really weird, sorry for that. But yeah, the new web flasher will be the one that we will use in the future, and I'll archive the old one in the near future completely, and also make a redirection link on the old one to the new one. The old one was just not really that suitable. It only supported Edge and Chrome, and with the new web flasher, it supports all Chromium-based browsers, which excludes Firefox and Safari browsers, and Opera, if I'm not mistaken, as well. But nevertheless, it is looking better for one, and it is flashing basically the same. You cannot really argue about that, but it is doing a better job, and it is now under the core ethos of this BitX community, which is a great thing. All right, let's see. Sorry, I missed it. How to become a tester. Becoming a tester is really easy. Just go into the channel, apply for role, type in there why you want to become a tester, and then you do get access to the channel called Firmware Tester. In there, us devs regularly sometimes post new firmware releases, beta versions that we want feedback from the people, and then you can decide if you upload it to your device and give us some feedback or not. Everything is open here, so you're not forced to do anything. All right, let me put in the chat really quickly can anybody please quickly post in the new web flasher in the chat so that I don't need to do that? It would be nice. It is called bitxorg.github.io slash bitx-web-flasher. Yeah, and Anderson just quickly posted the GitHub repository from bitx.org, and there's the bitx web flasher. Great, thank you for doing that. So let's see. We talked a little bit about the heat sinks as well as temperature issues that we do have with Gamma, especially. Ben, if I'm not mistaken, the Supra also does have the temperature die. And we also...
It does, yeah. I was actually looking at that after we got these fixes, and that one might need to be adjusted as well. So we'll have to...
Are we missing a register there as well, or what's going on
there?
The
register is definitely set appropriately. The only thing that would need would be the settings for the EMC 2101. Basically, there just need to be a calibration step that happens once, or not per device, but we need to figure out essentially what the basically the resistances of the die are, and then once you plug those numbers into the EMC 2101, then it can calculate the correct temperature appropriately.
So let's see, do we have TPs for the temp dies?
On the 403, not sure.
Here.
Oh, it's not something you can measure with a multimeter, I don't believe. It's a little more complicated than that.
Probably you need an oscilloscope for that.
Yeah, what I've been doing is taking measurements at room temperature and then in a controlled environment at high temperature.
Oh, interesting.
Comparing the results. So.
So, and can you measure this directly on the chip itself? So if you would just solder, let's say, like two cables on the temp die, a positive and negative, and just measure it under 70 degrees and 23 degrees?
No, the EMC 2101 does this, and it also does a bunch of kind of other magic behind the scenes, which I alluded to. So I have to take all the readings from what the IC is seeing.
All right, so this probably will also receive a fix on the Super end, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot less important. I mean, the Super is like half the power, so
true. Temperature.
We haven't really received any issues or reports of people having issues with it. So obviously it's not a huge deal, but it would be good to, make sure it's accurate.
Yeah, sure. Right. Let's give you guys a little bit of a quick preview of what you will expect in the next release. Hopefully. Let's see. I mean, it depends. Could be two different things that are happening here. Either we do cherry pick a couple of these fixes and do a release such as 2.3.1, or we decide to go all balls deep down into it and we release the version 2.4.0 with plenty of changes. We're not sure about that. But there are definitely a couple of changes. I want to quickly go over them to give you some sort of an expert, a little bit of expertise in what you can expect next. So let me quickly see what is there. We do we do have something that's really really nice, I'd say, and I love it. It is on the stylish side. It's on, yeah, only on the visual side, but it is needed probably. So as soon as you do start up your Bitaxe in the future, there will be a display logo on the screen, the Bitaxe logo to be specific, which will be displayed on the OLED screen, which has been done by Mutatrum on GitHub, which is really nice. It's not really doing anything, but it is lovely, and it's great to see. There's also like this conversation about adding some sort of a boot up screen, like a loading bar or something like that, as soon as your ASIC tries to ramp up. Because now with recent releases, you do have the option to live modify your Bitaxe frequency for the Supra as well as for the Gamma. With the Ultra, it's currently not in there. I was talking about introducing it in there as well, but I haven't had done. It's too many things that are going on in the back, so bear with me. There is also, for those techie people under you that are interested in it and that are building firmware locally, I just uploaded a quick factory file script which does basically the same that you have been doing before of building the firmware and then flashing your configuration to the firmware, and then you do have your factory file. I just modified the current script a little bit to make it that it automatically detects if you do have different configuration files or binary files in your current directory, and if it does detect them, it will create you multiple factory files, which is nice and handy, but nothing major. What is really interesting, and Ben, maybe you want to go a little bit about that, you have done plenty of changes on the UI to give it a more dark theme, I'd say, as well as a more or less complete rework of how all these bars are displayed.
Yeah, I was just following some of the guides that were done by BMind. They had come up with a style guide for the Bitaxe and some branding information. So I just changed the theme, AxOS to kind of fit the colors, and then kind of reworked some of the those gauges that display, things like temperature and power into just like regular bars. I think they show a little better than the gauges do.
Oh yeah, it does definitely have a really nice touch to it. Maybe someone of you who's in the audience can post a quick picture of how the UI now looks. If you haven't seen it, you'll definitely find it in a couple of different channels, such as the Gamma or the firmware tester channel. You do have read access to the firmware testing channel if you don't have the firmware tester role. So you'll definitely find a couple of pictures out there of people liking it or disliking it. It depends on what your style is. There's also this conversation in the back that we might do a setting where you can choose your own theme. We'll see if this comes with the next release or not. But there was this definitely good point of someone pointing out that there might be a couple of people that do have color blindness or other visual issues, and we might want to be able to switch it somewhere in the settings, and therefore this will definitely be a thing, but I'm not sure when. So yeah, just to give you some sort of expectation on this one. If I'm not mistaken, it has been said by Anderson, which is like a small new legend coming up there. He's doing so many things, which is great. Alrighty, let's see. We do have also a couple other things. I think in version 2.3.0 we have the eye that shows your credentials if you do click it, or is it in the next one? I think it's already in 2.3.0 if I'm not mistaken. Like if you type in a password and you want to see if you typed it incorrect, I believe that's already in the firmware.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, testing firmwares can sometimes be a little bit confusing. Yeah, but Anderson said it should be in 2.3.0. So yeah, I probably covered this as well somewhere. Let's see, what else do we have? We do have a couple of ESP now warning limits, but that has been fixed. Interesting. Yeah, there's also this interesting thing. If you do connect yourself to a pool, for example, public pool, CK pool, or other pools that you love to connect, you usually do have the ability to scroll down and click on sort of a link. There are a couple of things that need to be addressed with it, but changes are happening on this, and it is, at least for public pool, it's working perfect. For other pools, it is more or less working. Sometimes it's not really. So this is hard-coded stuff. If you do connect yourself to a pool and you try to click on the link to see your hash rate or your stats overview on a pool and it is not working, just point it out, please, somewhere in the firmware channel or somewhere else. Or if you are capable of that, create an issue, please, on GitHub so that we know there's something going on and that we need to address that. But yeah, this is more or less a thing that we need to hard code in there. I'm not really sure if we can change it. So maybe we can use a couple other things, but for now some pools will work and some won't. It's just how it is. Let's see, what else is there? So we do have plenty of techie things that are going on with the next release, but I'm thinking about what is worth talking about, not to underestimate one of these changes, but I want to keep it quite interesting for you guys. And also, if you're not aware about this, please make sure to ask any questions. Town halls are usually for you guys. So if you do have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat on the right hand side. You do have a little chat icon. Just click on there and then you can type in any messages. Or if you want to come up on stage, just raise your hand and I'll make sure to bring you up on stage and we can have a nice chat. Just needed to say that here. All right. One thing that is probably necessary to talk about is Swarm. And for those of you who don't know, Swarm is this functionality that allows you to scan or basically add IP addresses to your XOS dashboard and monitor other devices. So instead of typing in all these different IP addresses or host names of your Bitaxe devices, you can literally take a look on all of them on one single page. It has been introduced a long time ago, I'd say. Probably it's, how long has it been? A year? Or less than a year? I don't know. But it has been introduced by you. So it has been written by Ben, and it was sort of this thing that is sometimes working, sometimes not. It did had a couple of issues, but for those of you guys who are really loving it, it has been reworked sort of by Ben and a couple others, and is now working in a state that is way better than before. And with the next release, there will also be other things, like you can sort it, or it will automatically be sorted, like it will show your table in terms of IP address sorting. So on the top is the lowest IP address and on the bottom is the highest IP address. There's also now a better check for duplications. So if you try to add a Bitaxe IP address that is already in there, you're just not able to do it. It will tell you, hey, this one is already in the list. Don't do it. There's also now a auto add button, which will not override other things. So you can scan your network and let your Bitaxe do its thing. Instead of you needing to type in all the IP addresses, it will scan initially for all the different IP addresses of Bitaxes it can find, and if it does find any, it will add them to the list. As well as you do have the option, if it couldn't find a Bitaxe device, you can add it in later on using the IP address. I mean, so Anderson wrote in the chat that swarm fixes are good in general, and yeah, there was this initial thing of a couple of us devs thinking about removing Swarm overall from XOS for the reason being that we do have external tools. And there's always this debate about the ESP. For those of you who are not really tech savvy or into this kind of thing, but the ESP is more or less like a mini computer, and it does have two cores where it can basically operate two different things at the same time. But it gets a little bit more complicated than that, and the biggest issue with that is you are limited on what you can do with your device. For example, if you want to pull the temperature, as well as giving your ASIC new work, as well as showing some data over Wi-Fi, you can't do all these three things at the same time. You need to time it a little bit. And with adding things like pulling data from other devices, it becomes more and more that you need to do at the same time, which is quite challenging for these smaller things, for these small computers. And the whole debate was, do we actually want the Bitaxe to scan your network and figure out if there are other Bitaxes and then pull data from them? There are argues for it and against it. A couple devs were thinking about removing it for the reason being of we have third-party tools such as the Chrome extension I wrote that you can just install, and then it will check your Wi-Fi or your local network address space that you're in, and if it detects any Bitaxes, it will show them to you, as well as from BMind, the lovely extension that you can install in your Umbrel node, which does exactly that. It shows you your Bitaxe fleet at home, and you can manage them. So you probably do get the point. There is some sort of a debate about, should we keep it on the device and increase workload the ESP is doing, or should we remove it in favor of external apps? And now that we do have plenty of fixes for Swarm, I'd say it is it's not getting removed, I'd say, at least for now. Yeah. Let me see what's going on in the chat. Yeah, Anderson is writing, which means that implementing even small things might be a lot more effort than expected, as opposed to implementing something on whatever that is immensely powerful as compared to ESP32s that meant to be small and fast. Yeah, that's the thing. Like he's definitely pointing out the correct thing here. It can create some really hard effort on the chip to do its work than what you were expecting. Like even just displaying things can be hard for these devices because everything needs to be timed. And in the back, Scott and a couple others are already working on better timing on all of these things. So yeah, we're trying to do our best to keep this thing up and company and not crashing. VA Robot is writing, could be really crazy in implementing a Grafana dashboard and Prometheus exporter. Yeah, probably not gonna happen. I don't know. It's some immense work. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know, Ben, do you have anything else to add?
Not really. I mean, at least as far as Swarm goes, it's not really a lot of load on the ESP, more than an external tool would be, because all the logic and everything is done in the browser.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's one thing we can leverage is once the website is served, which is file, you can essentially use the browser to offload a lot of work. So. I mean, I still think there's things we can do in the future. Something I've wanted to do since for a long time is move a lot of the statistics from an HTTP request to WebSockets. In
Mm-hmm.
theory, that's going to be a lot lighter weight and faster. I think in comparison, HTTP requests are a lot more burdensome for the ESP to handle. So it'd be nice if we, can kind of stream some of the stats rather than having to request them. But we'll see. It takes some effort to do.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, there's also this thing. If you don't know, there is QX, NerdQX, NerdQX Plus, and Plus Plus, and a couple other derivatives as well, which utilize the beautiful screen of the Nerd monitor, and there is a little bit of a modified firmware running on them, which allows you to do different things, such as having an exportation for influx as well as other things. So in theory, plenty of these things are possible. One thing that is bugging me is porting over the ability to have history data on the device. So currently on the ESP32 that we do have in there, we're not really utilizing everything that this little piece offers us. For example, there's a different storage solution on there called PSRAM, which we are not utilizing currently, but which is utilized in the Node QX firmware, which allows you to basically, as soon as this device boots, it stores historical data such as your temperature as well as your hash rate in there. And if you do load up then the web UI, it will show you a beautiful graph on there for the last 1 or 2 hours, instead of you needing to wait that it loads and shows you a graph. And if you close the window and open it up again, you need to reload it again, which also comes in handy with your move forward of hopefully, or maybe someday in the future, moving over to WebSockets instead of this HTTP request, which simply just allows you to do plenty more things. So there's definitely a ton of things going on and a ton of ideas that could be implemented hopefully in the future. But yeah, everybody is sort of limited on their time, right? Let's see, we do have a couple of questions there. Does Swarm just monitor the other IPs over time through polling or something? So the current implementation is it polls the other IP addresses every time you click on Swarm. With the changes that are upcoming, it will be every 30 seconds as long as you do have the website open, the web UI. So this is more or less some sort of an automatic system, which is great, instead of you needing to do something. But if you want to reload it more often, you can do that as well. There is also a button for refresh now. Also, there is another question. Maybe you can answer this, Ben. There's the question, how much load are the RPE calls actually?
It's hard to quantify. I mean, you certainly can overload them if you request too often. I mean, we certainly don't want to request so often that it's conflicting with its ability to, provide mining jobs to the ASIC, right? Because then you lose hash power. But I mean, that's why I want to move to WebSockets. Though, I think it's significantly less load for it to send data through a WebSocket than to serve a HTTP request every single time.
Yeah.
And these aren't super powerful devices. So, I mean, luckily, the one advantage is the S3 does have 2 cores. So that's right. If we were only having a 1-core ESP, then we would definitely be running into issues. But maybe in the future we can have a quad core if they ever release something like that, just to do other jobs.
There's also this good question from Weird Robot in the chat. Is there any documentation available about the IP endpoints, or should we look at the code? So for everybody who's tuning in newly in here, or everybody who's listening to this later on, if you want to get a little bit more familiar with everything around Bitaxe, just check out the wiki. Let me type it in the chat. The osnu.wiki is our documentation about plenty things of Bitaxe, and you will find a section about the API. So if you want to dive into that as well, make sure to check it out over there. It is just some documentation. It also can need a little bit more work on the documentation to show more things, maybe even explain some code snippets or other things. But it is time consuming as well, writing text and pushing it and doing things over there. So if you guys are into it and have a little bit of time and would like to contribute, feel free to do so. I'd love to do that. Or I'd love to have more of you on this here, as well as every other dev as well.
I see the guys down in the chat talking about, what we could do for like core painting and stuff. The answer is yes, you can do all that, assign priorities. However, the mining tasks, last I remember, I think actually are two tasks on their own, which we don't want to conflict. There's like this queue task and then the actual task to send jobs to the ASIC. So it gets pretty busy. There's a lot of stuff going on. And then there's tasks for kind of all the other processes as well. Power management, you certainly don't want to block its ability to shut down an overheat situation with HTTP requests and all that kind of stuff. So it gets complicated quick.
Yeah, also there's this thing with the expressive framework. You can build some sort of a task priority list. You can, for example, set a task to the highest priority. So no matter what, even if other tasks want to do something, but the highest priority task wants to do something, he always goes in there and other tasks need to stall. Therefore, let's say, for example, you're getting new work and something else is going on, and then you also want to go on the web UI. The web UI is never as important as getting new work and new results from the ASIC. So making sure that the Bitaxe does what it is intended to do is always the highest priority, which is quite interesting to look into that. You can make sure to do that. So for all these tech savvy people in here, just check out the system.c file in the repository. There you can learn plenty of things about that as well. I think, Ben, you spoke a little bit about that. So I do see that people are talking about it. If you can pin a specific task to a specific core, sure, you can do that. But ideally, you don't want to do that. You want to handle it this way, if I'm not mistaken, that the ESP itself decides on which core it runs a specific task.
I mean, it could be advantageous to pin a task to a specific core and kind of organize in that way. But like I said, it's because we have quite a few tasks. It's going to be hard to, I think, make sure that we're not blocking any important tasks.
Mm-hmm. It gets quite intriguing.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Apart from these couple of updates, I'm not really sure. We do have a new channel, which is called Ember 1. If I'm not mistaken, Scott sort of talked about this. Ben, do you know, is this topic official or not? It is, right?
Which topic?
The Ember 1, his new project.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's a channel for it.
Yeah, so for all of those who don't know, there is a new channel under member projects, which is called Ember 1, which is another project that Scott is working on. And the idea is behind that to create a 100-watt mini hashboard standard. So in order to, let's say, create small miners, I don't know, like having a 300-watt miner at home with 3 hashboards, or you do have one casing and you can decide how many hashboards you want to put in there. But the whole idea is to have a hashboard standard in the 100-watt range. And this looks quite interesting. Unfortunately, Scott is not here and cannot really answer questions about that. But it is definitely something new that I'm really interested to see more about. So make sure to check out this channel as well to get updates on that. Who knows what will come out of that? Ah, that's great. Derek joined in here. So for all of you who don't know, Derek is from BeMind, or was, and the add-on, or however you call it over in the Umbrella store, the plugin, I don't know how you call this, is a extension for Umbrella to, as I said previously, to check on all your Bitaxe devices that you do have at home and monitor them and edit them. And it was currently, or it is currently in the community repository, but now it will be moved over, called Pluto Mining, to the official repository this week on Umbrella. So more people will be able to get this and just install it with a one-click installation, which is great and lovely to see. Thank you for posting that and letting us know. This is really, really, really nice. And I definitely need to get myself another mini node to make sure to run Umbrella again and check it out as well. Ah, there's a link, plutomining.io. Lovely. Make sure to check it out, guys. It is really looking good, and it is looking so professional. I really love this style. All right, guys, if you do have any questions, feel free to ask them. If not, I don't have any other topics to talk about. I don't know, Ben, do you have anything?
I don't think so. It's quite a bit.
Oh yeah, definitely. It is quite a bit on all these updates that we do have, from fixes to bug fixes to just UI improvements, which are also nice, as well as plenty of other things. It is a long list of multiple things that needs to be done, and I, for myself, can only say I'm so thankful for everybody who's contributing to this. I can't even imagine how Scott must feel like creating this project, from having this idea, and now we're sitting here with thousands of people using it, and I'd say maybe 2 or 3 dozen of people that are actually contributing. It's just insane. All right, we do have another question from Zine. Any updates on the NerdX Gamma? So that's an interesting question. This question needs to be asked to BitMaker, and he answered test boards this week. All right, so maybe there will be the NerdX Gamma very soon as well. Lovely. Oh, yeah, there is a question in the chat. Any word of Noctua going to the new connector? This is probably a question for you, Ben.
Unfortunately, Noctua has really long lead times, and they're very expensive. So I probably wouldn't say we're going to get a Noctua fans with the new JST connector within the next like 6 months or so. But I am working on trying to get an adapter. So
I mean, the JST,
of course,
yeah.
and of course, there's always the option to simply just solder the old header on yourself. But
Yeah. I mean, the JST connector on its own is really great for being just way smaller, using less space, and giving you more creativity on creating new, I don't know, cases or something like that, probably. Sure, it is not the standard connector that you will find on plenty of fans, but it is a commonly used fan connector, if I'm not mistaken. I've seen it on plenty of other things. The Raspberry Pi itself
Yeah.
is using it.
yeah, I do think the Raspberry Pi uses the same connector, although I think the pinout is different, which is unfortunate. Although you could also get a adapter made for that. So that's just a simple
That's a funny
swapping
story. I
wires
was
around.
I was trying to look into that, and I don't know why, but there are a couple, maybe one cable that is out there which costs like $5 per cable. That is sort of a connector, but if you really want to do like a connector from JST to the old 4-pin Molex header, maybe you just come up with a new connector that you design yourself, but don't buy expensive stuff out there. It's not really worth it.
Yeah, I'm working on getting some connectors and hopefully be able to offer them to
Oh,
the
great.
community for less. The markup is just insane. I think, these little connectors probably cost maybe 10 or 20 cents guesstimate, and they're selling for $5. Kind of ridiculous, but
It is. But that's the thing. If nobody is producing it and you're the only one, you can dictate the price. Which
yeah, and,
is
and unfortunately the kind of quote unquote standard fan connector is really anything but standard. It's almost impossible to find connectors for them.
hmm
Even the official like header that we see on the Bitaxe by Molex, it's difficult to source. There are very few alternatives, and trying to get the like kind of the adapter piece that you can use to like extend fan cables, that doesn't exist. I found out that even like the companies like Noctua, those are pretty much all custom jobs. There's no
Oh yeah.
Molex standard that has that connector type. So
I mean, you,
in a way, the JST stuff is much more standard. It's just that the industry has
not really
uh,
adapted to it,
had
right?
right. So it's unfortunate, but it's the way things are.
I don't know. Maybe the JST connector is a little bit more easier to break. I don't know if you're forceful, but you can also bend the pins on the old one. So on the Molex connector. I
I
mean,
think it was just it's been the standard. I'm not sure for how long. Certainly ever since I've been working with computers. I think it was just kind of someone picked it, and it that's what everyone uses.
yeah. I mean, sure. A couple of people were unhappy about it. I've seen it recently that on X we do have a BitX worldwide group or chat or however you want to call this. I'm not that familiar with X, to be honest. Where people are a little bit complaining about it that there's this new connector and they cannot plug in the Noctua fan. I mean, yeah, sure, that's a thing, but I don't really know what to answer to that. There will be soon a connector. I mean, at least you stated that, so we'll see if this is a thing in the future or not. But there will also be Noctua fans with the new JST connector very soon, or sooner or later, I'd say. So things are a little bit slow on these kind of ends, but I'd say this is something minor compared to doing bug fixes and making sure your device works as it is intended to do. Oh, there's a good question. I'm not sure. Ben, do you know how many amperage can the JST connector take compared to the Molex? Because
I think it can take 1 amp, and so that'd be 5 watts, which is quite a bit for a fan.
oh yeah, definitely. I mean, these fans usually take what, like zero point 0.7 to
A
1.2
few a
watts?
few milliamps, I think. Yeah, just a few milliamps mostly.
Hmm.
It's not until you start plugging in like fans off the S21 that you're gonna run into anything over 5 watts.
Oh, that's an interesting question. Mr. V is asking why. Oh, it should be what. What happens if you solder both fan connectors types onto him, with both having 4 pins? He assumes that having both will cause some fan control and RPM reading issues. I'm not sure.
I'm actually not sure about that, having both plugged in. I know they would definitely work, and so should the PWM control, but I don't know if this sense pin, I don't know how that would work.
So Crypto Eyes said TAG is not working,
Tac
but
now, yeah,
PVM
that's what I
is working.
suspected.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's just 5 volts ground PWM, which is signal that's sent out, and then tac go in, but
Mm-hmm.
sensors too, it probably doesn't work.
It probably gets confused by having two different values coming at the same time. So
Yeah.
It's not bad. Mm, shouldn't matter, to be honest. I mean, it's also the same thing. Like you could imagine, you plug in two times the same fan. Maybe it will work, but if you plug in like two different fans, for example, the standard fan and then the a Noctua fan, it will definitely produce two different tag values, and therefore it will not work.
Yeah, you could certainly clip one of the sense pins
Mm-hmm.
on one of the fans or scrape the trace off or something and just take the sense readings off one of the connectors.
Yeah. There's a question from Claire about XT connectors, if we're thinking about using XT 30, 60, or 90.
Um, I don't think so.
I mean, sure, the barrel connector that we do have, you could argue it is a pain in the ass sometimes, but so far, unless you use this Chinese copy, which is not good, it is working as intended, I'd say.
Yeah, we used the XT, or that was a consideration for the hex, but they're way overkill for the Bitaxe. So I mean, it could supply over 100 watts. Those are 30, 60, 90 amp ratings. So
Yeah, that's a little bit insane. All right, with that out of the board, let's see. Yeah, all right. He was asking for the XT30 for the hex. So the non-working version 304 of the hex does have the XT30 connector, I believe. And yeah, it just happens to be that the 304 is not working, so maybe we will see a 305 someday. I'm not sure. It depends. It depends on the people that are working on that, which is currently only MacFighter. So I'm not sure about that. But for the hex, it could actually make sense to use something different than a barrel connector. Alright, Mr. V is asking on the gamma voltage regulator. It is currently running at like 80 to 85 degrees Celsius. Is this a risk? As you answered your question sort of yourself, the voltage regulator is rated for 120 degrees Celsius. So running it at 80, 85 is okay. If you do feel it is too hot for you, just attach one of these tiny heat sinks with glue. There are these, I'd say, Raspberry Pi gluey heat sinks that you can attach to things. I use that on my Gamma, for example. Just a tiny one. It reduces the temperature by a couple degrees, not that much. And I'm not cooling the back of my Bitaxe. I've seen a couple of people doing that, and for new versions it actually doesn't make sense. But if you do have, for example, a Bitaxe Ultra or a Max, and you cool the back, and now you go to your friends and tell them, hey, my Bitaxe is running way cooler than yours. Yeah, you're cooling the temperature sensor, not the actual chip with that. So it works, cooling the back, but I'd say only for the Gammas and for the Supras. For the Ultras, not really, and for the Max, no way.
don't worry too much about the TPS 546. It has automatic shutdown if it gets too hot. I'm currently looking at the code. It's 145 degrees. So,
145. Oh my goodness, I already thought
yeah.
120.
It does have a warning limit at 105, but it will shut itself off at 145. So
It can get pretty toasty.
yep.
I'm definitely not touching that. All right. With that, I'd say we do have at 9 o'clock here. Wait, what's going on here? We get new questions in here. So, what is the minimum voltage under load for the TPS to shut down? I believe it is 4 point something. This is programmable, so you can change it in the software, but there's also a physical limitation of the chip. The TPS can range from, I believe, 3 volts to or 4 point something volts to 12 volts. But don't try to plug in 12 volts to your Bitaxe. It will destroy parts on it. Don't do it. Only plug in 5 volts. Hey,
Hey,
what's going
how's
on?
it
You're
going?
coming late, buddy.
Yeah, I think I my calendar is still on the other time zone.
Right, this is weird. Like I put it in on my calendar as well as 9 o'clock p.m. But I put it on Discord, and Discord is using these time zone thingies and winter and summertime shifts. So now it is 8 p.m. Maybe I
Oh,
just switch
okay.
it back again to 9 p.m. because this annoys me so much. Because 8 a.m. is sleeping time for my son, and now every second Saturday I cannot bring him to bed.
So we're gonna switch it to back an hour later.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Well, then I want to update my calendar. Be perfect.
Yeah, don't do it. I'll switch it for in 2 weeks. It is annoying. I'm sorry
Sorry, I
for
missed you
that.
guys. What happened? What's going on?
It's
We have a
lovely,
ton of people here.
lovely to have you in here. We talked about upcoming changes for the next release. We also talked about the bug that Ben found out about the temperature die and the temperature sensor in general, as well as about firmware changes in general, about the UI and other things. And we briefly mentioned your channel uh, of Ember One, but I quickly closed this topic because I don't have any insights about it. So maybe you want to share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's the Ember One is uh, a cool name that Harry Sudak, the he was a part of Grid, the big mining company. Anyways, he's like, I'm really good at naming things. It's like, oh, cool. What do you want to call this? He's like, thought about it for like 1 second. He's like, Ember One. I was like, fantastic. So it'll be called Ember One, and it's the idea is to make sort of modular mining hashboards. They're like smaller versions of Bitmain hashboards, which are like 1,000 watts. So these will be 100-watt hashboards, and the idea is to create sort of like the S19 hashboard, like this sort of standard that can fit into a lot of different configurations, but on a smaller scale, and of course, totally be open source. Uh, and the first one is going to be based on the BM1362, the chip out of the S19J Pro, which right now is the cheapest of the modern ASICs, I would say, the ones that do version rolling.
Interesting.
The cheapest per hash rate. They're quite affordable. So we'll do the first one
I, I,
based on that.
I think hash rate wise, they are kind of on the same spec as the Max chip, right?
Yeah, they're like 300 gigahash
Mm-hmm.
uh, kind of thing. It's
They
kind of
don't
crazy
require
because
any level
they're like zero point 0.3 volts core voltage, so it's a little bit goofy to work with them. But we're gonna chain up a bunch of them on this board, and yeah, I haven't exactly figured out what the size yet is going to be, but the idea being is that we we originally wanted to do this. I've been working on this with the Pod 256 guys, this idea and getting funding put together for it. But we originally wanted to do this with the block ASICs that they've been touting, but they're just not ready yet. I begged and pleaded with them to send me some early samples. They said no, but the funding kind of came through at the same time. So it's like, all right, let's do this hash board with the J Pro chips. The idea being is that when the block chips are ready, that it could fit into the same standard mini hash board form factor.
Hopefully.
If I can make a suggestion for
Yeah.
form factor, one thing I've noticed is like on all the ant miners, like the platforms are really deep, right? You have like a lot of chips in front of each other,
Mhm.
which requires like a ton of airflow. So what I would do if I was developing some sort of like commercial type space heater is I would make them really shallow so you can use a minimal amounts of airflow and still get the heat without all the noise.
So that's like really narrow and like in reference to the way that the air direction, like
Right. So like
it's
make
blowing
them
across a
like
short distance.
right. So make them really I guess kind of like tall and skinny, right? So the hot air from one chip isn't blowing on to to like the chip behind it.
Maybe like 2 rows of chips, but then like having 8 or 10 right next to each other.
Right, right. Like Bitmain solves that with, like having, I think, the best example is the ones where they have the soldered on heat sinks.
Hmm.
The ones in the front are like super tiny, and then the ones in the back are huge.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're
Yeah,
trying to get
that's
like
right, man.
maximum power density, right? But if you basically just have just that front row, you wouldn't require a whole lot of air to cool it. So you wouldn't need to, use such loud fans.
That's a good idea. I like that. And then you could kind of like stack them up sort of on top of each other so that, it gets thicker but not like deeper, so that you can, have
Right, exactly.
fans moving air across it. Yeah, that's a good idea. Good idea.
You could even like arrange them in like a circle, right? And have like a fan like blowing into them or out of them or whatever. Kind of like those
Ooh.
trash can Mac Minis.
Yeah, it's the trash can mini. Although that would kind of want to blow like long ways across it, I guess.
I mean, yeah, I guess it would be depend how like it's set up, but like if you had them like a circle and the fan blowing like kind of in the cavity, right? The air would, I guess, kind of go. You probably need some ducts and stuff, but
One of the like this works out to be like 12 of those J Pro chips, and because they have such a low core voltage, like it really makes sense to put. I think I'm going to do them all in series, right, to get it up to 3.6 volts.
Hmm.
I kind of wish the modern chips did that. I mean, dealing with a level shifter, both in terms of like the logic on like the schematic and also just having all those extra parts, it doesn't seem really worth it. I don't know.
One of the cool things about the J Pro chips is you don't need level shifters. And I was kind of racking my head around this for a little bit, but Sidehack mentioned it, and I was talking with, I think it was Nebula about it, but I think that they can just do the level shifting internally because the core voltage, which is the offset, the ground offset between the two neighboring voltage domains, in this case, it's only 0.3 volts, which is, compared to 1.2 volt logic level voltage, it's smaller, right? It's significantly smaller than the shift in the logic level between the two domains. Whereas with all the chips that we've worked with, like on the Hex and stuff, those are 1.2 volts offset because of that core voltage, and then also 1.2 volts for the shift in the logic level. So I haven't done it yet, famous last words, but I think this is going to be easier because we don't have to have any level shifters as we cross voltage domains with the data. Now, you do have to have those LDOs in every domain, so that'd be like 12 sets of LDOs, but those are pretty small and cheap.
Cheap, yeah. But it makes me wonder why they made the decision to move to these higher voltage chips that require shifters, just because, like, thinking from like I'm thinking like corporate like perspective. Okay, you're paying for more SMT components. Why would they choose to do that? I mean, think how much simpler the Hex would be if we didn't have to put those level shifters in it.
Yeah. I don't know. I would hope that they've done this sort of optimization, right? Because the chips now, the cores still operate on that 0.3 volts. It's just they have 4 of them inside the chip. We can pretty clearly see that that's the case with all those bypass capacitors. So
It's just weird, especially since they moved to these single layer aluminum boards, that they would choose to add extra stuff to it when potentially they don't need to.
Yeah, it is interesting, and I think that the J Pro was their sort of only foray into these low core voltage chips, right? Because the S17, the chip before, and I think the was it the 1398, the S19 chip before was that higher core voltage, like 1.2, 1.5, and then right after it, they went right back to it with the S19 XP and K Pro. So, yeah, I guess I'm gonna find out what the problems were with
Yeah,
this.
there's probably a gotcha somewhere.
Yeah, right. They're like, fuck that. We're not doing this ever again.
I mean,
I
it's
don't
going
know.
to be quite
Maybe it's,
interesting because, especially, I don't know, maybe they choose that for the package size to make it more affordable, having more hash power on a sort of same package size compared to the older ones. I
I
don't
mean, I
know.
think like the main cost is the actual the silicon wafer, right? So if they were to break these down into their zero point 0.3 volt chip,
Hmm.
chiplets, if you will, it would, I think, cost the same to make the wafer. And then, I think probably the packaging in comparison is pretty cheap. I don't know. And then, at least from my perspective, these really big dies are becoming really, really delicate and hard to work with. They crack really easily, comparatively to like the smaller dies and the bigger package ratios of their earlier chips.
I don't
So,
actually know how it works, but hand waving it, you would think that it would be more efficient to have sort of all these cores stacked inside the chip as opposed to like, um, having to add more pins and then route the signals outside the chip and having the cores spread out across more physical chips.
well, I mean, each like unit is kind of like self-contained, right? Like in my head, it's the opposite, where you're like with these higher power densities, you're limiting the ability for like the chips that are like, say, like in the very center to operate at most efficient temperatures. If it's surrounded by all this other hot stuff, you'd want to like spread it out. But again, it's hand wavy
Yeah.
speculation. I don't know.
Yeah. We just need to make an open source ASIC, like 130 nanometer open source ASIC, and
Oof.
There's I mean, how
see how it
cool would it
works.
be to like have knowledge of why it made all these history? I think they're super interesting. It's really unfortunate they don't share absolutely anything with the community around it. But I guess that's part of their trade secret, right?
We'll see how
Yeah.
much Block will share in the future with us. Let's see.
Yeah. Did you see
The
they
announcement, yeah.
yeah, just published their website. It's called something else. Not
Yeah,
Block.
I know.
It's kind
I've
of a
read the
forgettable
article
name,
they
but
posted there. It's quite intriguing. It's like, all right, I'm giving you some candies here, but I don't tell you what's inside them. it's
oh,
it's
I mean,
so
we've been doing this
funny.
for like a year and a half. It's so nerve wracking.
Yeah,
Proto. There we go. Thanks, weird robot. Proto
proto.
is
Yeah,
what Block is calling their mining department.
definitely interesting, but definitely good to have some sort of a, maybe I'm allowed to call it like that, a hashboard standard from the open source community. That's definitely a good idea to create that and have that, especially going forward with some older chips like the 1362. And by the way, Zine from IC Tag just offered you 100 of them, or a couple that you do need, in the chat. Um,
100.
yeah, he just wrote, we desorted over 100 of them, and if you need any, just ask them. They have plenty and would love to contribute.
Oh, there it is. Oh, yeah, we just saw 100 AK. We're not going to use the AK chips. Those are the small ones. Those are the
Oh,
teeny tiny small ones. Yeah, there's like they have a ton of variants in the 1362 range, like the same like AA, AC, um,
PB and
AG
so
kind of
on.
thing, and they're all pin compatible, except for I believe the AK, which is a much smaller chip. Like it's so much smaller. Um, but I'm gonna try and go with what seems to be the most common one. I think we decided landed on AC.
Is it
Um,
the same one that's used in the what's the one from Gecko Science, the pot?
oh, I don't know. Actually, I don't know what Gecko Science uses in theirs. It I think it makes sense. I mean, I think Gecko Science also realized that this is a very cheap chip for the hash rate, and it
Hmm.
makes sense to use it. Yeah, I don't know because the Brains Mini Miner also uses the BM1362 chips, probably for the same reason.
I wonder if
If
the AK made pin compatible if we like put it on a like a carrier PCB.
Oh, if the AK would be compatible on a carrier, possibly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like these
we
SoC
kind of
chip thingies that they do use for the level shifters, huh?
yeah, or just like
Yeah,
a little
yeah. I
like
think like
yeah,
chiclets, like these little sub PCB
Mm.
boards.
like they're like super thin, like thinner than a regular one, probably like 1 mil or like less.
Didn't even have to use the AK. Today was a good day.
Uh, Scott, there's another question for you from Clear, a little bit more up there. One question for you on the S21, the 0.8 volts and the 1.2 volts were chained through the ASIC. Why don't we do that? Maybe it's a bit easier for routing.
On the S21, the 0 would chain through the ASIC. Well, we only have one chip, so we're not really chaining anything.
Hmm.
You're talking about on the Bitaxe?
I don't know.
I don't know.
It's his question. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's right. Like these
He's
chips
talking
are
about the
so.
hex. Hmm. Wait. He's talking about the hex, but the hex does not use the S21 chips. So the hex only utilized the BM1366, and then Tiny Chip had released the Sutra hex with the BM1368s, but a hex gamma has never been released. So
Well, it's the same. It's the same thing on the 1366 and the 1368. They have kind of these I/O voltages pins on both sides, and they seem to be just connected straight through. Now on the hex we have 3 voltage domains, so you can't chain them across voltage domains. You need to have LDOs for the reference voltages in each domain. So I actually don't recall. Is it? I don't know. Maybe we didn't chain them between those 2 chips in each voltage domain, but it's kind of like, however the routing works out, whether that makes sense to do. I mean, for Bitmain, it makes a ton of sense. They obviously want to be chaining that together because they only have a 1-layer hash board, no vias. They have to put these little jumper pieces on there anytime a trace needs to cross over. So these chips are absolutely made to have all of the signals go in one side and out the other side. So it can just kind of snake in this S-curve through the hash board, which is more or less how it works on the hex as well. I also didn't lay out the hex. That was done by the fabulous McFighter.
do you know if he's working on 305, or is there even any work on the 305 to make the 304 working?
He was looking at 304 to see what was up with it, and I saw a message from him, and he had identified a couple things that he thought was the problem, like why 304 wasn't working. And then I don't know what happened. I think he got distracted. But that would be cool to do a 305 and get that working, because I know there was a lot of improvements for that.
We'll see.
I don't know.
Time will
I don't know.
tell.
We should ask him.
Alrighty. I'm not really sure if we do have any other topics for the town hall today. I mean, we are always open to just have a chat afterwards on the normal chat, the voice channel that we do have, the general voice. So, I don't know, Scott or Ben, do you have anything else you want to talk about?
I mean, shout out to E. Anderson and Mr. V. Those guys and a couple others have been just killing it on the front end development work on ESP Miner. I feel like we've gone from pretty bare bones to a much upgraded thing, thanks to their help. So super appreciate that. E. Anderson got our whole build process sorted out, which is a huge improvement. Much appreciated.
Yeah, I
Mutatrum,
gotta figure out how to
dude,
use that
got
for
the
this latest build.
LVGL display library working. I can't wait to check that out.
This will be massive.
I
Especially with LVGL working, we can also consider moving to other displays,
Yes, I found a cool
utilizing
display the other
SPI.
day. I found a cool display the other day. It's a color display,
Ooh,
and it has a similar form factor to what we have now. But the cool thing is it has a ribbon connector, and you can actually get the SMD, you know, connectors for the board,
ooh.
which I think Ben will probably be happy to hear. I ordered a couple of them to screw around with it. Um,
Nice.
to get
Interesting
upper display
times
gain.
are upon us.
Yeah, so many cool stuff. I mean, the biggest challenges these days are like what to work on, right? 'Cause there's so many cool things. I uh, I just got I just got back from Sao Paulo, Brazil for the SatsConf,
Hmm.
and man, it was so wild. Like so many people are so fired up about open source Bitcoin mining, the Bitaxe. I Ben hooked me up with some Bitaxe gammas, and I like basically snuck them into my country because they have a 120% import tax
Oof.
on electronics, and so the Bitaxe definitely falls under that. And so I didn't really know this ahead of time, but they didn't talk to me at customs. I just went right in, but I only had nine. And like once the word got out that I like had these because we were doing a workshop and then I was gonna sell them after, I got like mobbed. Like I actually got just surrounded by people, and they were you know, like no, I was here first. Like all this, like I want to buy all of them. I'll take all nine. And I'm like, whoa, okay. And so it was kind of crazy. Like at some point, someone was like trying to start up like an auction. Like I'll pay more than that guy, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a lot. But it became apparent. It became very clear that like there's a huge market there. They want this stuff, and we need to get manufacturing set up in Brazil as well as South America. So I had some cool conversations with people there to start up, at least importing them to the country via some alternative channels to sell to get started, and hopefully they can do manufacturing. It's just so wild that like they just can't buy it. Like even the components to like build these things have like super high import tariffs on it, man. And then
It's insane.
talking
I've
with my
shipped to probably most of the countries around the world now, and I'd say south of our border is definitely the hardest by far. And it's not just Brazil. I mean, like all the countries down there, Brazil, El Salvador, Argentina. Most of the time, packages don't even make their customs. So
man, yeah, it's like we got to get connected with the people who have like import export experience and like know how to deal with this, and like know the specific deal for their country. Um, I mean, I think that's the way, right? Just throwing it in DHL and hoping for the best is, I guess, like
Yeah.
you said, is inconsistently enforced.
yeah, I've shipped a couple times down there, and the ones that did go through well use this white glove delivery service. So they basically like take your packages, and then they have someone from the company like bring it across the border.
Oof. Shady
Yeah,
stuff.
that was the vibe that I got. Is that's how it's done. Apparently, Brazil has this like special economic zone in the very like northern part of the country, kind of in the middle of nowhere, where you can actually import stuff, uh, like China has with Shenzhen. It's like yeah, it's a special zone that's sort of not subject to all the same tariffs, but it's not really available to smaller companies. This is only for like the big guys. So that seemed like it could have been cool, except for the fact that yeah, you have to be a big, massively established company, and I don't know, like lobby for your rights to use that.
We'll get
I
there.
just don't
We'll get
understand.
there.
Like no, I don't want your money for import.
All right.
I mean,
Huh?
this is what Trump's proposing, or he did it in the past too, right? Is like, oh, we're gonna, bring manufacturing back to the United States by increasing tariffs, right? And that is only affecting bringing stuff into the United States, and so it's rough on small companies who are trying to get stuff made outside of the United States, which in the electronics components world is everything.
So it
It's a
seems, at
weird
least for
game.
like the South America, not only are the customs and tariffs high, but like the process they use like just doesn't really work or whatever. So like I said, like a lot of stuff just goes missing. So I don't know if that's due to like corruption or whatever, but I think there's like the issue of high tariffs, and then there's like the issue of the ease of which you can actually pay the tariffs and get stuff into the country. Seem to be two separate issues.
Oh, yeah, right. You're like, no, I want to do this. I just need to get it done like
Exactly. Yeah.
soon. Yeah, that's a whole other thing. These bureaucrats just can't help themselves. Brazil imports are like the mafia. Bitmaker. I have friends who went there and just asked me for some components to bring them on a plane. Yeah, it's nothing like just packing your bags full of reels of components.
I mean, I had a friend who lives down in Argentina, and the last administration they had, he said he couldn't get like literally anything. Like he couldn't even get his mail. Like anything coming in the country, just like forget about it.
Oh no. Yeah, this is kind of the challenge of the, free and open source decentralized hardware, right? With software, it's easy because as long as you can get a connection, you can send the stuff. A little bit hard with hardware because it's so real, but I mean, there was a lot of people there I talked to who were, building bit axes, hacking on bit axes, like getting it done, despite all of the overhanded regulations. But honestly, love to have someone to talk about the tax situation after you mine your first block. Yeah,
Yeah.
we don't know how that works.
Yeah. No financial advice.
It'll be interesting to see how eventually, I guess we're gonna get these tariffs. If we ever end up putting them in place, how that's gonna affect pricing of bit axes. Just because, I mean, even though like I assemble them in here in the U.S., like almost none of the parts are actually made in the U.S. I mean, even the Texas Instrument parts, which is a U.S. company, all those are made in Malaysia and whatnot.
Oh yeah, it's so weird when you're doing like manufacturing in China to have to like import parts that are made in China. It's such a fucking weird thing. Like, yeah, I feel like this is all set up for big companies to succeed and to just like absolutely confuse and frustrate small companies.
Potentially, yeah. But
I guess we'll see if I think they're building a TSMC fab here in the U.S., right?
Yeah, yeah, that's probably like a weapons kind of
but
strategy, right?
on top of that topic, if I'm not mistaken, Taiwan just created a new rule or governmental rule regulation about TSMC that they are not allowed to create 3 nanometer chips outside of their own country.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so there's this. I'm not sure if it is a law, but it definitely went viral last week. I was reading it and I was like, man, they're trying their best to keep everything in their own country. I mean, it makes sense
Well,
for Taiwan.
I mean, if I can put my tinfoil hat on for a minute, I wouldn't be surprised if there's like a backdoor shady deal here with like the whole CHIPS Act, where essentially the U.S. and China were agreeing to move all the manufacturing to the U.S. here, so that China can take Taiwan, and then once China takes Taiwan, we can manufacture those 3 nanometer chips here. Like it all seems like kind of like a big setup.
I mean, it could be that we're now entering the conspiracy theory.
I mean, it's
I
not
don't
really
know.
a conspiracy. It just a commentary on, I guess, the
Just
way
from
the
a
world
point,
events are going.
yeah, just from a point of view of talking about it, it does make sense, but it's hard to tell because obviously we are none of the big guys yet, so we need to work harder, and potentially we are in the future.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely need more chip manufacturing outside Taiwan,
Definitely.
regardless.
I mean,
I
anywhere,
think,
right? We like
yeah, anywhere, like
totally
literally
specialize
anywhere.
on basically one company. That's not going to be good no matter where it is.
Yeah, then the
No.
other thing is like even though that Taiwan is manufacturing them, ASML is basically the only company on this planet that is producing their machines, which is from the Netherlands. So it's quite interesting.
It is really interesting. It is like, I mean, like all the biggest companies that are essentially like driving the economy around the world, like make their key components at this one place. Like that probably keeps a lot of people up at night.
Well, especially since we have the neighboring country chomping at the bit to take it over.
Oh my gosh, yeah, right. Could it get any worse?
So Anderson is asking if there's any other company that is making ASICs. I mean, apart from Bitmain and WatchMiner, MicroBT, which is WatchMiner, and I'm not sure. Avalon is probably also making their own ASICs. But Epic, I believe Epic is not making their own ASICs.
They I know the guys at Epic. They're all cool dudes. They come from AMD, so they have like a chip design background,
Mm-hmm.
and they have made ASICs in the past. They made some like shitcoin ASICs. Um,
Mm.
I I have not heard of them making a Bitcoin mining ASIC. Um, they make machines like mining rigs.
Yeah, and control
Uh,
boards.
yeah, and control boards and firmware. Um, the Epic block miner, they built basically as far as I know, the only complete mining machine with Intel's block scale ASICs
Mm-hmm.
was made by Epic. I think that's what the block miner is. Could be wrong about that, but yeah, they've been doing it for a long time, and they've made like full on hash boards and firmware and like big industrial mining machines with all sorts of different ASICs for a bunch of different cryptocurrencies. I think some of the other ones that are making chips is Bitdeer, right? They're up and coming.
Oh yeah, sure.
They started making chips and then they acquired Desawee that was kind of like I don't know, like hot shit like a year and a half ago. They have their Seal miner. I think they're on their second revision that actually has like okay efficiency. Like I don't think they're up to Bitmain level. Um, but Bitdeer is started by Jihan Wu, who started Bitmain. I think there was like some famous split a while back, and so it's it's like another version of Bitmain. Uh, they released a document a few months ago that said that by like the middle of 2020, at the end of 2025, they're going to be at 5 joules per terahash, which is insane. I think
If
that's
it is true, yeah.
yeah, I think it's wishful thinking, but this was their like official roadmap they released. Um, I heard some news about Intel and their chips. I'm not exactly
Do,
sure what I'm supposed to say about it, but
mm,
I would say I do not think they're getting back into the game.
that's my thinking as well. Like they tried it, they failed, and from the point of view where they're currently at, like as I said, like no financial advice, but their stock market is shit. So I'm not really sure if that is a good idea to come back into a market where they initially failed.
I mean, I wouldn't count them out for at least potentially producing chips sometime in the future. It might not necessarily be their own design,
Oh yeah,
but
okay.
I watched a video a while ago that was talking about they're trying a new strategy to kind of be more like TSMC, where they just take in orders and produce chips at their fabs
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
rather than trying to kind of like make their own chips and do everything themselves.
I
So
see.
they want to be more of a fab and less of a, I guess, like chip producer, if that makes sense. We'll see. I know they're getting the very first high or ultra high UV I can't even say it. Lithography machine.
Oh yeah, that's a hard word.
Um,
They have a different name
um,
for it, right? They call it like 19A instead of 3 nanometer or something like that.
yeah, well, they have like a bunch of custom Intel nomenclature, but I think it's like the first machine, and it's the one capable of the smallest features so far. So it's gonna be interesting to see what they do with that, because that's gonna be better than what TSMC can do. I know they spent billions of dollars on it, so we'll see.
It seems like a good idea, right? You don't have to like tie the success of your fab business to like the success of like essentially x86 processors. I mean, I know Intel makes a bunch of stuff, but I don't know how much of it is like at the latest and greatest node process size. So yeah, I mean that makes a
Yeah,
lot of sense. I
I
think
mean,
I
hopefully
heard.
that'll lead to being able to get like bigger chips, kind of.
Yes, please.
We're talking about those shuttle services that we kind of like test stuff out. They were talking in this video about how they're going to keep the old machines around and then try and like basically outsource work for them, while they're going to concentrate on these, the newest machines. So it'd be cool if we could, open source chip made in Intel. It'd be kind of cool.
There's an upstart Bitcoin mining ASIC company called Zetagig that some OSMU people are familiar with, but they produced a prototype mining ASIC
But
on
didn't
one of these
this,
shuttle services.
if I'm not mistaken, they're stopping their development?
I think they were looking for funding. Like they kind of did this proof of concept. They did it on an older shuttle. They did a shuttle on an older process, and then they'd be like, okay, it works, and we can extrapolate as to like how efficient this would be if it were on the latest process.
Huh.
And this was like, I don't know, like June or something when I saw it. But I think they were like, all right, cool. Now let's find some people to pay the big bucks to do a tape out on like a modern thing. But I think they did that with Intel.
Interesting. All right, but
Just too bad there's not like a JLC site you go to, just upload your chip design, have it show up a week later.
I mean, it's promising that there's so many people getting into this chip business, right? I think that this community and open source mining, what we really want at the end of the day, I think, is easy access to chips with data sheets that we can buy, one of, we can buy a reel of, we can buy a pallet of reels. That's how I think we can get these designs to market, get them out there to start really banging on decentralizing mining. Chip design seems really hard, and you could spend like a lot of time and money doing that and still not have a Bitcoin miner that's going to start decentralizing the network.
all right. I don't want to be the bad guy here, but this is probably so far the longest town hall we ever had. 1 hour 40. Do we want to move over to the general voice channel and have a chat over there and stop the town hall right here, or do you want to keep processing?
It's up to you. You're the boss. I got here late, so whatever you want.
Depends on the people, I'd say.
Why do you hate talking to us?
What?
I love talking to you all. Let's just go for another hour. We got this.
All right. I mean, they can leave if they don't want to hear it, right?
Yeah,
We
right.
don't have a captive audience here.
All right.
What
Okay.
is there like?
Now let's
Do you
start
get
with
like
the reader
do you
shit.
penalize you for having too big of a file to upload or something?
What? Oh, I've seen that. But this is probably some sort of HTTP issue, not a too big of a file upload issue. I don't know why, but it trips out sometimes if you try to upload the www.binary file and mostly I've seen this after a quick reboot. So for those of you guys who are not knowing that, if you do update using the functionality of downloading the ESP-minor binary and the other binary, I don't want to say www all the time, if you upload ESP-minor binary first, this will cause your Bitaxe to restart. So first things first, right? So wait for it to reboot and be up and running again. Then you can upload the other binary file. Second of all, we're talking about this for months, if I'm not mistaken, Scott, that we definitely need to move forward to create one single file instead of having two.
Yeah, I'd really like to do that. It's going to require some sort of digging into the internals of the OTA update mechanism,
Yeah.
as well as making an image that can kind of skip over blank spots, or like, you know what I mean, like have sections of the binary, or sections of the flash rather.
Yeah, just
that can
doing some sort of
jump
a
over.
diff, you know?
Yeah, I know in like hex files, when you're looking at binaries, there's like a couple different types of hex files, and there's a type that includes addresses, just like in the format of the hex files, so that it could be like load, this data at this address, and then this data at this address, and that I think is specifically made so you can skip over sections of flash.
It might be easier to just repartition the ESP to have the two partitions next to each other, but I don't know.
Why are they not next to each other? Was there some?
I have no idea. It's probably just, I think the WW partition came like later, and then rather than being smart and putting it next to the other one, it probably just got appended to the end of the list.
I assume this came from an example or something, right? Didn't you do it?
Yeah, I think that's what happened. Is I just put it at the end of the list, not thinking
Okay.
about how that would be, because even the OTA didn't come until after that, so
Right.
it was not forward thinking.
I mean,
Yeah, I guess there's no good reason why we couldn't just change the like the offsets of the partitions.
what's
Yeah, they
really
would just need
intriguing what's really intriguing me about the fact is like we do have the two OTA partitions that we could use for this whole diff idea that is rising with this whole concept of having like one primary partition which is doing all the stuff, and we have the OTA partition which we're using to check if there are any diffs to the main partition, which is just like a lovely idea, and I'm not really sure if this is actually doable or not. We would need to
think
figure out how to check the diff to the main partition, right?
I think before we go to like a Delta firmware upgrade, which is I think what you're talking about, where we
Yeah.
only change the stuff that's changed,
Yeah.
like just a Delta firmware.
It's just wishful thinking.
I mean, that would be slick. That makes for really small update images that happen faster. It's also like you start increasing the chances for failure. I think just having a firmware image that just has the complete, AXOS and ESP minor in it and nothing else, and that they go into the correct locations in Flash, I think that could work.
It's definitely something that we need to dig in, but another funny thing that we also need to do is to dig into the whole debugging scene of Espressif, right? Like we both talked about it plenty of times, like debugging with it is sort of a pain in the ass.
I got it working once, and I think it was on my laptop, and I haven't figured out how to get it to work on my
Clea said
desktop
he's
computer.
on it right now. He's trying to get it.
Who's trying to get it?
Clea wrote it in the chat that he's on it right now and is trying to get it. Like, I mean, I've read some of the documentation about the Espressif framework and all the debugging that they do offer, but the approach that we currently do have of just writing our own debugging into it and just applying it if you need it or not is, for the current state of development, the best, because it doesn't actually need you to understand more about the Espressif framework. But for others, it's probably a pain in the ass as well, because now you need to be aware of debug flags somewhere in the code, and you need to set them or don't set them, which is, yeah, it's not the best, but it is how it works currently.
Like I have yet to run into a bug that is harder to fix than getting debugging working in the tool chain. It's like, oh shit, do I want to spend a ton of time getting debugging working, or just like, brute
Yeah.
force
I mean, maybe
fixing
maybe
the
you
bug
could
with
argue
printf
about
or
it.
something?
Like, if you do get debugging working properly, we can improve way faster. And Anderson wrote in the chat like we need better testing, unit tests, but also functional integration testing would be great. I I read something funny today on X. Someone quoted, "Writing unit tests is not trusting your own code, so don't do it."
My vote is to work on the Rust implementation rather than spend all the time doing that.
But if I'm not mistaken, we only have like 3 people occasionally working on the REST implementation, and then like Scott, you are not digging into REST as far as I know currently, and I mean I'm not in
No, no, I'm
Rust
not
as
digging into the
well.
Rust implementation. You know, I think he may want to announce it, but I know TDB3 is working on some more modular aspects of it. I know Keela is also working on modular aspects of the code. It's like there's a lot of people who think Rust is the best thing ever, and it may very well be, but we have to make sure that we're not just like throwing out everything we've done already to like start again from scratch. Oh yeah,
I'm not
TDB2.
saying
He's
Rust
working
is the
on a C++
best thing ever.
implementation.
I'm not saying
Ooh,
that Rust is the best thing ever. Just that C is the worst.
He's the worst.
it
Yeah,
is.
there we go.
I
All right, we got
mean,
two people working on C++, or at least two people that think it's the way to go. That I think C++ would be pretty cool, right? When we get sort of object-oriented
Anderson,
programming.
stop
It's
it! Like,
somewhat supported by the SDK.
oh my goodness, Anderson
Yeah, I
just
mean
wrote it.
anything object oriented. Honestly, I'd probably be happy with. Just like I was trying. I think I was talking to you about it. I was trying to do something, and it was like function overloading or something simple that you're just like you do it all the time. Or at least I do it all the time, and C just doesn't support it. And it's just like this would be 1,000 times cleaner and simpler if it just allowed me to do this one thing.
Yeah, and I think C sort of is easily what is it interfaced, or C++ is easily interfaced with C, right? So we can sort of incrementally do this, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, it's quite interesting. We do have a couple of things ported over to C++. At least, for example, the NerdNOS firmware. There's plenty of things moved over from the Bitaxe repo to this repo to make the NerdNOS in general functional, and most of the code is written in C++. So something or parts of it are partially rolled over to C++. But if TDP really is working on a C++ implementation, that's interesting, because it would open up a whole new world to plenty of other things. But changing over to another language, I'd say, usually is not really for the better improvement of the device, but for the programmer or the dev in general. Because running it in C++ or in C shouldn't really change anything on the ESP itself. As well as I'm not really familiar with C++ on Espressive framework, so
Yes, neither am I. Neither am I. So I think when I started it, I just went with the C examples because, like,
if
you
I'm
know,
allowed to request something, I want someone from the audience, please write the code in assembly.
oh, there we go.
Now
Put it
then
in
we are talking
assembly.
about speed.
Speed, convenience, flexibility, understand, readability, really.
Yeah, that's not the case with
I
assembly.
think WSSH just volunteered to do it all in ASM. There we go. You got it. Do it on like a punch card if you're a real man.
I mean, anything object oriented, I think, just fits with what we're doing really nicely. I mean, we have multiple different things, like different ASICs that all kind of implement this common interface. It's not something C can really handle, but it's something that like any object oriented language can handle with ease in terms of making it clear and readable.
Binary machine code. There you go. Let's do it in Verilog.
Mm.
This is turning into the XKCD comic where it's like real programmers do.
That's
Well,
right.
real programmers use the cosmic rays focused through
A magnetized needle in a
atmosphere.
steady hand.
Yeah.
I mean, Anderson does have a point. Like he pointed out, like implementing the secondary pool would be 10 times easier in C++. Yeah, that's the thing. That's what I was saying. Like changing over to another language is way more easier for a programmer if it is more readable, as Scott said, or understandable. Those instructions that we do use, it wouldn't change anything on them. It's just easier to adapt to maybe a wider range of developers that we could trick into our game here. Who knows?
Welcome to OSMU Joe Rogan.
We're taking over the world.
So Avril has mentioned this. A couple of other people have mentioned it, and I fully support this. But we need like an open source firmware for Antminers or for industrial miners, right? That runs under Linux.
Yeah.
And we've done a lot of this for ESP miner, right? A lot of the drivers and things like that. But because of FreeRTOS and I think C, it doesn't really like scale very well towards running under Linux. But I wonder if C++ would, or if there's at least more reusable components in C++ that we could move over to a project to support bigger miners running under Linux, under embedded Linux.
I mean,
Well, I think that's where like the Rust crates really shine, right? And I think that's part of why people really like it.
Yeah, I think you're right.
it's definitely an interesting topic, and also going forward with hopefully seeing the bit card being there routed soon, I'd say, because it is there, it just needs to be routed and a little bit of software needs to be written. We already do have PyMiner from PMX, I just short call him, which could be used for initial testing. So yeah, everybody in the audience should get the point of it doesn't really matter what kind of language you use, there are plenty of options, but having some sort of a standard would be nice, especially something that is on a wide range. Imagine writing everything in Java. That would be a
Oh man, that's
pain.
what I studied in school. Let's do it. Java. So you cannot use C. It just requires more advanced techniques. It definitely does, right? It doesn't give you a lot of these things out of the box. Like you can do object-oriented programming in C. You just have to write it yourself.
All right, DWRL Loch wrote that he's currently working on a Linux miner written in Rust, so maybe there will be something sometime. If you're interested in it, check out the GitHub repository of Bitaxe.org. There is the ESP miner Rust implementation, or sort of, because it's not functional, but there are a couple of things that has that received some work from Nebula Miner and a couple other ones. So there's definitely something to figure out from that. If I would be able to read Rust, I would probably comment something about it, but I'm not.
Private project for a miner with STM32. Yeah, those ESP32s have that. They have the separate SPI flash, which you could just get boatloads of it, which is pretty badass.
Yeah, the version that we are using has 16 megabytes.
That's like by far, I feel like the largest microcontroller flash size I've ever used is like maybe 2 megabytes or 1.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have got a lot on the ESP32. It's pretty
Yeah.
luxurious.
And then as well, there
Turn
is
it on
the...
there, right?
Huh?
So we haven't even turned on the PS RAM.
No, we haven't turned on the PSRAM. That's the thing. That's
Mutatrum did that, right? I think for some of the display stuff. I saw a PR go by, or at least an issue go by that was talking about turning on the PSRAM.
Yeah, maybe somewhere. I mean, it's still a thing to look into it, because yes, it's a separate PR now. All right, okay, Muchachum did that. That's great, because now that he did that, maybe I can find some time to port over the historical data into XOS.
I don't know how many of you are running master ESP miner, but the Bitaxe logo on the OLED looks so dope. I love it.
It's really nice.
What's the status of the hex firmware? Is the plan to go back? Yeah, I would like to merge that back into the general firmware at some point, but I think we have, like two separate factions that are like working on some people working on the hex, some people working on the regular Bitaxe, and it was I feel like both people wanted to go full steam ahead, and it was kind of hard to keep on top of the of merging. But yeah, I would like to do that.
I mean, a merge back probably is not going to happen. What we would need to do is to adjust the current main branch to allow the hex to be used as well, which would require a little bit of changes. But it's
You mean like just like porting it, like moving it back by hand, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah. Plenty of these things.
I know. And the longer we wait, the worse it gets.
It does. That's the whole point. Like, I'm still not capable of working on version 02 for the hex because I just have no time for that. No, Anderson, the memory leakage has still not been found. I haven't had any time to do that.
Man, my hex has been running fine for a long time.
Version 0.1 or
Yeah, the
yeah,
one
the
that doesn't show
version
the hash rate on the screen.
0.1 is fine, but version 0.2, which I was about to release, I don't know, like 3 or 4 weeks ago, but then I found a memory leak, and I don't know where it is. It's 100% on the history stuff. Yeah, definitely. I messed up something there.
Oh, the hash rate history,
Yeah,
which is so cool, by the way.
it is. I mean, PMax did that, and it is just so great, but I really need to find the memory leakage in order to use this knowledge to port it over to the Bitaxe.
Yeah, I think E. Anderson's right. It's in the CJSON library. They just allocate memory just willy-nilly all over the place.
Yeah, probably somewhere is a free or something like that missing.
Yeah.
You know
yeah,
what
that's
doesn't
tough
leak
to keep
memory?
track.
Hmm?
I said, do you know what doesn't leak memory?
Hmm?
Rust.
Oof.
Because they check it at compile time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Well,
you can still write
like,
dangerous code, but you have to be explicit. You have to like mark it as like this is dangerous.
you know what also doesn't leak memory is Java, Python, garbage
about that.
collectors.
I don't know about that. I've seen some horror stories.
I'm really frustrated because my new job requires me to dive deep into Java, and I don't want to.
Some would argue like that Eclipse is a memory leak.
Eclipse. Oh man, I was just thinking about that the other day because they have that amazing RTOS like task debugging available in Eclipse. But even with that, it's not worth it to go back. Holy crap, that software is just disappointing on your soul. Totrum, Java is wonderful.
I'd say
I have
it
fond memories of
depends.
it, but I also haven't done it for a long time.
I probably used it the last time like 3 years ago while studying, doing some sort of a project, and I programmed the Candy Crush game in Java, but that was everything I did with Java. After that, I left it instantly.
Just gotta have that memory. Yeah, Java. I seem to remember there's like lots of packages, right, that you can import. I seem to remember it working better than Python in that regard.
I mean, I highly recommend staying very far away from anything that Oracle touches. That's all I can say about that.
That will what?
That Oracle touches.
Oh, that Oracle touches. Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't they bail out of Java? Isn't like. I mean.
I think the like official Java is still owned by them or whatever.
Is it? They just like make all their money So
Yeah, I
right
mean,
now it's like
remember,
a NetSuite
they sued Google because Google made their own basically like Java implementation or something.
Hmm.
Oh, really?
Not by copying any code, but copying the interfaces, like
Wow.
literally just like copying how the interfaces worked. And they got sued over it. I think they Oracle won, if I recall. I don't know.
Oh, that's a really productive thing to do. We should just all re-implement languages and then sue each other. This is
Well, I mean,
great. This is
that's
how we
what
get
Oracle
ahead.
is, right? It's like a small group of engineers backed by a large army of lawyers, essentially.
Yeah,
You know
yeah,
what? Just let's rewrite ESP Miner from scratch. You know.
yeah. Let's do it in like something really goofy, like Lisp or something.
I did, like Anderson wrote it in chat, but Go. I'm not really sure. Does Go even run on microcontrollers? Nope.
There's
Okay.
probably some goofy project to do it.
Probably, but not gonna touch it.
Yeah. I remember it was a long time ago, but I remember talking with some people about a project, and I actually tried it out. They had like a dev kit, but it was embedded JavaScript.
Oof,
Ben would like it.
that's interesting, but
I know. It was like, holy crap, I don't want to do that.
I mean JavaScript, yeah. I mean, good thing
I feel like
is,
on resource constrained devices like microcontrollers, like you have to at least be thinking about like types and memory usage and things like that. And like these languages like Python and JavaScript that just completely abstract that away. Like you can't, it's very hard to like even determine what a type is. It just like makes me so nervous in embedded because you just don't know what it's going to be doing.
there's
Until
actually a
Python
good
really.
question in the chat. Are there any trade secret implications to publishing findings from debugging Bitmain-owned ASIC chips and making those findings public? I mean, maybe, but you know what? There is this big GFY on the OSMU wiki. So if Bitmain ever wants to try to sue anybody of us, good luck with that.
I think it probably falls along the same lines as that Chinese company trying to trademark the Bitaxe name, right? Like, come and get me.
Oh yeah, yeah, try
Oh
it.
yeah, that's fun times.
I mean,
I don't know. I mean, I think there's bigger players than Bitaxe too, right? You got to think that all the sort of Luxor, Brains, right? They're all doing the same thing, reverse engineering Bitmain products.
I still think that some of these bigger companies like Luxor and Brains, they must have some sort of inside information, especially for how fast they do develop all this shit. If a new miner is coming along, it takes them less than a week to publish a new firmware for this new miner.
I mean, I think they have teams of people working full time on it who've been doing it for years and are
Okay,
quite good at it. I
that's
don't think
fair.
they're talking to Bitmain because we know Bitmain is actively hostile against them, right? I mean,
Oh,
every new miner that comes up essentially has some sort of new secure boot nonsense so that those people can't load their firmware on them. They're playing a cat and mouse game. I think Luxor is clearly the best at hacking every new version, every new control board version from Bitmain to enable to load their firmware on there.
mm-hmm.
All the rest of the guys have been like, fuck that, and they're making their own control boards now. I think basically everyone else makes their own control boards, so they don't have to deal with this like game, this cat and mouse game with Bitmain to load arbitrary firmware
I mean,
on
it
those
gets
control boards.
even worse if you do talk about other manufacturers like MicroBT, because they do other weird shit to keep you locked out. So, for example, Epic is the only company that was able to talk to the ASICs, for example, and I think there has never been a control board from MicroBT being flashed with a third-party software.
It really makes me wonder why exactly they're so insistent that you run their control boards.
I don't know. Even the market share is so low, it doesn't make sense. They could increase the market share by making it a little bit more easier. I mean, don't give the code, but make it more easier for the people. I don't know. So more people will
Just
use the chips.
raises some eyebrows. Like what's the angle? They've they've had stuff in the past like ant bleed.
Mm-hmm.
So what are they benefiting from by devoting development time to having their firmware locked to their boards? What is the purpose?
I mean, it definitely gives them a much bigger platform for sketchy shit, which we know that they've done in the past.
Right, like they're not going to go to a dev and say, "I need you to implement a software lockout," which is going to cost them money, unless there's a reason to do so. Right? You're not going to do anything just because.
I've heard some bullshit like arguments like, oh, they don't want to have to support people who load third party firmware on their machines, but it's like, I don't know, man.
Well, they don't. Like who installs Brains and then calls up Bitmain, right? To be like, oh, my Brains control board isn't working, or software isn't working on your control board. Like that's not a thing.
I've heard stories of people that have like fucked up their miners with third party firmware, and then they've tried to like basically load stock firmware back on before returning it for warranty service. But I got to believe that's pretty minimal. Also, Brain's warranty service is total bullshit. Or not Brain's, Bitmain's warranty service is totally bullshit, right? So if like I think a lot of people just don't even bother.
It's the whole thing. Like I've heard it a couple times from different big mining farms that they quickly set up their own repair center in-house because Bitmain itself is just not really handling your issues. It takes like 2 weeks to ship it back to China, and sometimes they just ship back the same machine and you do see like screws were not open, so they never really looked into the device. They just kept it in their in their on their side for a couple of days and send it back to you with the same issue as before. So it's quite interesting.
I talked with a guy over here near me that started a Bitmain authorized repair center.
Mm-hmm.
It sounded so gnarly. Like, you have to like go to China, like at your own expense, take all these courses on how to repair Bitmain machines. And then you get in the system, and now you have the wonderful opportunity where you get sent all these machines that are under factory warranty, and you have to repair them, and Bitmain, pays you to do that. But the problem is Bitmain doesn't pay you shit to do it. Like, and apparently what they pay the repair centers to fix these things doesn't really scale with like how bad it is, like what's wrong with it. So, they might get one that has like one chip that's bad. It's like, okay, cool, I can fix that and like maybe make some money on this warranty repair. But like the thing's totally hosed. It needs all new chips or like the power supply or whatever. Like it's like they can't fix it and still make money because Bitmain doesn't apparently pay them anymore for those more advanced repairs. And apparently if you just like turn down these things, like you'll get kicked out of the program. It's like, oh, cool. Like that's a great process.
This is the worst example of what a monopoly system like this creates.
Yeah, it really is. It really is, right? If we had actual competition, then this bullshit wouldn't stand, right? It'd be like, all right, well, fuck you. I'm going to go get the competitors. I was talking with that guy, Portland Hoddle, who works for Marathon last night, and we were just speculating about what the Bitmain market share was, and I threw out 80%, and he seemed to think that was close, right? Number two, 80% of the market being dominated by Bitmain, right? Obviously, it's a total guess, but like it's up there. It's up there. Like MicroBT has got nothing in comparison.
Just open up your chips, MicroBT, if you're listening.
Yeah, right? I mean, the number 2 player, the number 3 player, they should be happy to do it. What's the worst that's going to happen? We're just going to like get their chips in more people's hands.
Imagine a BTX.
Yeah. I mean, I would do it. I don't want to like reverse engineer another one of these, especially like a minor player that's actually harder to reverse engineer. But if they were, willing to provide some supply of their chips as well as documentation, well, then it becomes a whole different story. Love to hear about the open source aspect of CG Miner. You know what? I heard the what a mine or the Mina something podcast. There's a couple dudes who do a podcast. It's like a mining industry focused podcast, but they just recorded one with Khan Kolivas, like CK of CK Pool, and the original author of CG Miner. I don't think they've released it yet, but I'm looking forward to hearing about that. I mean, this dude's a legend. He's been doing it for over a decade. The C and the G in CG Miner stands for CPU, GPU. Yes, Build a Mine. That's the one. Sean, Build a Mine podcast. That guy Trevor and Scott.
I'm definitely listening to that. Yeah, I'm really interested to listen to what he has to say about all that, because it's quite interesting. He created basically the first iteration of a mineable software that you can port to all of your devices, and in the first couple of releases, Bitmain didn't even bug with it, and when you start up your end miner device, it was clearly identifying as a CG miner. Some of the devices are still doing that. It's ridiculous.
I have a theory about what's going on here. I think originally they started with CG Miner, like straight out of the box, and just loaded that up. And in the beginning, they did release their firmware. Like you can go and get a Bitmain firmware called BM Miner, and it's like their version of CG Miner. And this was back like in the S9 days. And you can check it out. And I think they did release it. There may have been some, like they were forced to or they were strongly encouraged to, but I actually don't think they're using CG Miner directly anymore. I think what they are doing is they're implementing the CG Miner API, because that's what they started with. And so a lot of the miners now use the CG Miner API. And that PyASIC, software and a lot of the like farm management tools, they'll all talk to the miners over this CG Miner API.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I have like SSH'd into these miners, and you do like PS to see what processes are running, and there's clearly one running called CG Miner, which is pretty suspect. But I think I hope they've moved well past the open source CG Miner from a decade ago. Ooh, look at
There's
this.
so many people writing in the chat. Man, it's going crazy. Being on the longest town hall forever and now having so many interactive people is great.
Supra, more Supra, Avalon Nano, more Avalon Nanos, 3D printer, what's Miner? I heard a lot of people complaining that their Avalon Nano can't actually run at full power for any extended amount of time.
I mean, it gets pretty toasty, so the cooling solution is really, I mean, they do release it as like this home heater, but what you're gonna do with like 150 watts? Not that much. And I don't know, like the heating system they use, the heat sinks and so on, they should be capable of doing a better job, but I believe the fans are specifically designed to let it heat up to these numbers.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't say anything about the reliability of it. It looks clean inside. I mean, we both tore it apart and looked in there.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Definitely.
Apparently they have like 50 millimeter fans that like are just unobtainable.
Yep. Yeah, Primal Pig Eggs was just saying, I've seen some people running into issues with the Nano on power supply side. Yeah, that's definitely a thing.
I have to reboot the Avalon every few weeks and running at mid. Cool, it's not just us. This is great. It's a tough problem. Anything still being planned for an Avalon Nano Bitaxe competitor? Oh, hell yeah. All the time, every day. We're working on it. We'll get there. probably won't be able to beat that price. I mean, that price is really good.
It's
Or at least
insane.
their introductory price, that like $99 or $130, whatever it was, with the power supply.
Yeah, plus shipping, plus taxes.
Yeah, that's tough, right? I think that's highly subsidized. Yeah, I agree with Kevin. I think it's a loss leader. Like that was an introductory price, and they did it to create a buzz, which it worked, right? It created a buzz. A lot of people got them. Like that's a fantastic price for you know, a 10 chip, uh, 4 terahash miner. It's got an injection molded case. Uh, yeah.
There's so
People
many
order like
things to talk
100 at a
about. Oh my
time.
goodness.
Yeah. I'm gonna guess that
No,
Altair knows a
you,
thing or
you
two
know
about
what?
that.
I need to draw a hard line here. We're now sitting at 2 hours and 20 minutes already, so I think it's good to go and good to go ahead into the general voice channel. So with that, I'd say we do a limit here on the town hall. It's quite interesting, and I love to talk with you guys later about everything. So if you want to come over, just join us in the general voice channel. Other than that, I thank everybody for being in the audience. I thank you both, Ben and Scott, being here and entertaining the people with me. And thanks everybody for tuning in later today. So for those of you who are still
And
here,
shout out to all the cool people here. Look at
yeah,
this. This is packed. 27 people. We got Bitmaker, a legend.
it's just it's
Forrest, what's up, dude?
it's just getting better and better each time we're doing a town hall. I love it. I love it. So thank you guys really much for being here, and I'd say let's see you in 2 weeks from now with a new time.
All right. Awesome. Looking forward to it. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
What's the new time? Wait, so the next time it's going to be
1 hour later,
an hour
the
later than it
standard
was
standard
today.
time. Yeah, yeah. All right. Bye bye.